Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Jo Garofalo. I am the FASD Lead Advisor for the FASD Hub in Scotland. And thank you so much for joining us for this webinar with Mary Byrnes from Harrison's Hope. So Mary and I have a bit of a connection going back a fair while. We have thankfully met in person way back in Florida. We did some training together, and Mary has a great story, having developed Harrison's Hope, which is thriving with FASD. So Mary is a FASD expert and international public speaker with personal lived experience. Mary supports caregivers and individuals on the spectrum through advocacy and coaching and mentoring. And Mary fosters valuable connections with other organisations to develop programmes and policies that ensure thriving and sustainable futures for individuals with FASD and their loved ones within the community of their choice. And I think the big reason for me reaching out to Mary to come and speak to us is that I very firmly believe that FASD is a global community. And personally, myself as a caregiver, aside from my role at the FASD Hub, have gained so much from speaking to people and connecting with people across the world and understanding that my strengths and my challenges as a parent and a caregiver really relate to anybody across the world who's dealing with parenting a young person or a child with FASD. So I've made so many friends across the world that will forever be, I hope, part of my life. And I just love stories of success. I love to see other caregivers on their journey, learning, getting education, and becoming warriors and moving forward to improve outcomes for the families of the future when hopefully things will change and policy will change and procedures will change, and hopefully in the future, things won't be so difficult for families as they appear to be most of the time at the moment. So I want to thank Mary for joining us this evening. I would just like to say, please, 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 we have got room at the end of the evening for a Q&A. Mary has left time for us to chat. There have been some pre-submitted questions, which I have, which I will take the opportunity to ask at the end of this webinar. Our service lead, Barbara Ogston, is monitoring the chat in the background. So any questions that you want us to ask Mary, please feel free to put those in there. And without further ado, I'm going to welcome my very good friend, Mary Byrnes, and hand over to her.
Good evening, everyone. Jo, thank you for the lovely introduction. You went too far. I sometimes question whether I'm an expert or not, but I can definitely say I have the living experience of being a caregiver. And I hope by the end of our conversation this evening that if there's a little bit of hope garnished and a little inspiration ignited, then I think I've done my job. So thank you for having me, and let's kick this off. So I often get asked, Mary, where on earth did Harrison's Hope come from? Why are you doing what you do? I thought you were retired. And it's always fun sharing this story. So come along for the journey. Pause and type your questions if you have them. And I'm really looking forward to chatting at the end. Okay, so here we go. So who am I? Well, I am Mary. I am a wife, a daughter, a friend. I'm also proud to say that I am mother to Harrison, who joined our family via adoption as a newborn. We had to jump on an airplane and fly to Northern Ontario to meet this beautiful baby boy with 10 perfect fingers and 10 perfect toes. He was everything I ever wished for from the day I remember starting kindergarten saying I wanted to be a mom when I grew up. I can tell you that I have a double degree in sociology and psychology from the University of Western Ontario. I also have my early childhood education diploma and graduated top of my class the 2 years and top of placements 2 years in a row. I started my working career working with children and their parents who were working through some pretty complex needs. And then I was paying off my university bills by doing overnight respite awake with adults with complex needs. So I figured parenting one beautiful baby boy be a piece of cake, right? No, not so much. Definitely not so much. So was our parenting experience anything like yours? Let's see. I had a beautiful boy who I could never settle. He was fussy. He spit up every bottle he was fed. He had 20 soothers in his crib at night. He was burrito wrapped and still would not fall asleep. Let's see, as a little guy, he was a busy dude. I think that was the feedback I got from everybody, teachers, other parents, like, oh my gosh, Mary, how do you even have time to take a shower? And I would not admit that I hadn't for a day or two. Um, when I saw help from our pediatrician, because our little guy was a toe walker, he said he's fine, and he dismissed it. When he was difficult to feed, he said, well, it happens. We'll put him onto a different formula. When he was mouthing absolutely everything but food, the pediatrician said, well, it might be a sensory thing. He'll outgrow it. As our beautiful son Harrison grew, we started seeing more difficult symptoms, and he got diagnosed with ADHD. Made complete sense to me. There was anxiety written in there. There was a possibility of bipolar. And then we got the alphabet soup diagnosis. So I think the last one that was added to the diagnoses list was intermittent rage disorder. And that's when I pumped the brakes and said, no, I can't accept this. I know there's more going on, but none of these diagnoses are right. This was prior to COVID. And we were finding that no matter what we did parenting wise at home, there was escalations. At school, there was destruction, there was hitting, biting, cutting hair. And even out in the community, there was no such thing as going to the grocery store for a few minutes and racing back home, because there would be issues in the store. There'd be issues getting in and out of car seats. So school was a gong show. Um, I can't tell you how many times I had teachers rolling their eyes at me in teacher parent meetings, scolding me for being too firm, too harsh, or too relaxed and lackadaisical with my son. Um, and we just kind of gave up doing community outings because they never worked. Um, it became incredibly isolating and embarrassing because the neighbors on the street stopped inviting us to functions. Um, Parents just completely avoided us anywhere that we were out. We're on a small circle. There's about 50 homes here. Lots of kids our son's age, and none of them wanted anything to do with us, and their parents didn't want anything to do with us. We had elopements in the middle of the night. We had elopements in February with our son just wearing a hoodie and a pair of pants and a pair of socks in minus 30 degrees, which is pretty darn chilly. So we did have to call the police. We had a lot of police involvement in those days. And of course, they were charming enough to report us to the Children's Aid Society here in Ontario, because our son threw us under the bus saying that we were abusing him. It was deeply mortifying with my background to be forced by Children's Aid to take positive parenting courses and therapy for parents whose kiddos did not form an attachment to them. And that was just to get on a list to get an assessment done for a psychoeducational assessment as to where his learning disability gaps might be. or to get us any services for that matter. So when I look at this slide and I see that beautiful babe and I see the caregiver, we were this family. We were the family in crisis. We were at an adoption breakdown point. We were ready to be charged as parents with abandonment because we just did not know how to help our son. For me to admit that out loud at the time, gutted me, absolutely gutted me. Toddler years, not too bad, busy, didn't walk until he was 14 months, but then never stopped running the next day. Loud, demanding toddler, clumsy. Oh my gosh, charming, charming, charming individual, but clumsy as heck. His favorite word was no, and yelled often and loudly, preferably in the company of many other people. And we just couldn't figure out why the temper tantrums would happen and why they lasted so long. And I am certain there are many caregivers on this call going, did she just write a book on my family life? But I didn't realize that I was not alone. School years got worse. He fell through the cracks. I couldn't get an education plan in place for him. I couldn't get an educational assistant in the classroom because he didn't have a diagnosis that would support having that additional help in the classroom. So, time goes on, tick, 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 we get swearing. Oh, my boy can be a sailor on the best of days. Elopement from home, elopement from school. We've had police dogs out for a search. We've had helicopter policemen looking for him. We've had destruction at home, school, property damage, verbal and physical assaults. I think that was probably one of the most traumatizing things for me, was that our son physically assaulted me at age 10. And he was a fraction. He wasn't even 100 pounds soaking wet at that point. And I could have lost my vision as a result of one particular altercation. So I understand what so many of us on this call tonight have lived through, and I'm sure you've probably lived through even more. And that trauma stays with you unless you deal with it. So how am I here today talking calmly and smiling and laughing? How was I able to go to Orlando and connect in person, face to face with Joe and many other caregivers? Well, after being that shunned family, with the neighbors peeking out the windows, wondering why the cops were on the street, I actually ended up giving up a very, very high-powered position at Johnson & Johnson Consumer Health. I was the Canadian lead for their major programs within their project management team. And I could not be available to do the work that was required. And I had a difficult choice to make. I had to end my employment. I had to take my pension at a reduced fund, which was not in the plans. And I had to give up the benefits that were at least giving us a little bit of support just to be able to be available to get a diagnosis and to fight for supports, both at home and at school and in the community. Again, I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but it certainly took its toll on me. I think I was probably a month or so away from a complete nervous breakdown. I had my family doctor supporting me through that and medicating me. And he said, maybe it's time to look for a registered social worker to help you navigate for some systems and supports. And I did that. I took a couple of recommendations, and the one woman that I connected with was lovely. She greeted us wearing the fabulous red Converse sneakers, and I loved them the minute I saw them. She had decades of experience in her day job working with families and their kiddos with complex needs. And she was so easy to talk to, so approachable. And it was because of her that we got on the right paths and we got the right community partners on our team to support our son and us. She became a friend, a very close friend, in fact. She shared contacts with us to get a sensory assessment done with a highly FASD informed occupational therapist. She put us in touch with a fabulous speech and language therapist. All of this paid out of her own pockets, but at least we had the ball rolling. She also encouraged me to join an FASD caregiver support group that even though we didn't have the diagnosis yet, we were on a wait list for it. She was very confident that that's what we were dealing with. And she also encouraged me to get as educated as I could, as quickly as I could. And I have to say, even my husband, who doesn't always agree with me, does agree that she was the one responsible for changing our lives for the better. So what's all this have to do with Harrison's Hope? Well, we did have better days, and we did get our son's diagnosis, and that led to better supports at home, included some respite, which was remarkable. We were able to bring experts in to the school to make sure that his educational plan had the right accommodations in it. And respite staff took him out in the community and built his community skills. What was really fascinating to me, someone who's always connected with kiddos, um, my bond personally with our son improved dramatically because I became the calm one in the storm, and he came to me quickly, and we reestablished that relationship. And as that was happening, those symptoms were decreasing. And suddenly over time, I recognized a pattern that the days were getting a little happier. Um, Truth bombshell, not every day is a happy one. I am not back here skipping dancing for joy every day, but the days are better. And life started getting better. I could travel, I could attend conferences and see my friends. So I did. I joined the Caregivers Club. I joined coaching calls. I found my people, I found my village. And on those coaching calls, I shared, I vented, I talked about wins, and I asked for every tip and trick in the book. And suddenly realized that all of these things that other folks shared were similar experiences to what our family was going through. Um, and I have to say that I very definitely went through a very massive period of personal growth. This was not about changing our son and his behaviors. This was about me changing my parenting expectations, changing my expectations of what my son was able to do on any given day. And I have to say, I learned more in those few short years than I did in the first 50 years of my life. All of that was because of joining a global FASD community. I met other caregivers across North America, from Ireland, from Scotland, and some folks from Australia, and a few folks from New Zealand. And as I started being able to attend conferences, I met more and more of these people in person. I met the researchers and found out that I don't have to be afraid to ask a question and challenge them. And I'm happy to say that several of those researchers and doctors are now friends of mine. That's the FASD global community that's out there and available to all of us if we just reach out. So definitely, although originally the goal was just, please God, let me get through parenthood, and when he's 18, he'll be out the door and gone, transformed me. I became FASD informed, and I found a passion. I realized that I wanted to share what I had learned with other caregivers and with their loved ones. And I also wanted to create a living legacy for Harrison, our son. And Harrison's Hope is named as such because Harrison said to me one day, well, maybe Mom, you'll be able to bring other families hope like what's been brought to our home and to our family. And hence Harrison's Hope was created. Harrison's Hope is a safe place for all families, whether you're living with this disorder or you're not, or maybe supporting someone via your workspace, or out in the community as a coach. We want to be that safe place to learn, to share, to mentor, to give back. But bottom line, our vision is to see happy families living with FASD and thriving in their communities. So that spark is what gets me out of bed every day, no matter what the previous day brought me. That passion inspired Harrison's Hope. We are a federally regulated, not-for-profit organization. We focus on supporting caregivers because, let's face it, there's not anywhere near enough out there to help us. And we make sure that our communities are FASD informed. So we provide the services and supports for individuals, not until they age out, but actually throughout their entire lifespan. And you're going to be sitting there going, yeah, I can't do anything like that. My suggestion to you is, if you want to, you can. Don't let the yeah buts stop you. We can become isolated. We are judged, but our knowledge is power, and it's what's going to change the world. You are not invisible. You do not lack the skills to parent our loved ones. You can do it with the right village, with the right people supporting you. Address the biggie issues. That's you, not your kiddo. And you'll see big changes over time. Let others in with lived experience, and make sure every single community partner you work with is FASD informed. If not, it's your job to help them get there, because it will make your family's journey happier, definitely healthier, and a heck of a lot more fun along the way. Remember that clinician with the red shoes that I told you about? That's Caroline in the middle. She is my partner, my co-founder, and she is our clinical executive director at Harrison's Hope. We are the dynamic duo of living experience and supportive FASD informed clinician. Together, we are an unstoppable force. We will compel communities to learn about, openly accept, and include all families, including those of us living with FASD. I should tell you that we will not turn any family away that's in need of supports from the doors of Harrison's Hope. Not only do we support families in our province of Ontario, we have families out west on the west coast, families on the east coast, a family in Alberta, and a couple in the US too, believe it or not. Our partners, FASD United, is quick to refer people to our virtual caregiver group that's free and happens weekly every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time. My suggestion to you all on this call this evening, the power is finding your support team and making them your community. And the bigger the community, the stronger the partnership, the more growth we all have. So, thank you. Joe, I'm dying for a question.
Sorry, Mary. Sorry, I just turned my video off because I was like, you don't want me
Of
sitting
course.
there. Well, we've had like many positive comments about how wonderful you are, and all power to you. And I think that's the power of advocacy, and I think this is like the key to tonight's webinar really is inspiring parents to know that they can be advocates. And I think it's all too scary a
Definitely.
journey. It's all too scary a journey to think you know better than the professionals. I hear all too often in my role at the Hub for Adoption UK, parents calling in seemingly in crisis, but generally because nobody will listen. And I think that the real key to sort of the advocacy journey is the education, however you get that from whatever community. And, you know,
Yep.
you and I were lucky enough to do our training together. But I do think, oh, My camera is glitching. Sorry, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes,
Somebody
ma'am.
sent somebody sent me a thing saying my camera's glitching. Sorry. Um, but I definitely do believe that once you've got education, you have to take that education as power, and you have to believe and be firm in your own belief in yourself, that when you're going forward and you're speaking to professionals, you do know what is best for your child. I think the one thing I am always mindful of is how that is framed in terms of, as parents and caregivers, we can be so frustrated that
Yeah.
when we talk about dysregulation with our children, I experience talking to families whose parents are very dysregulated, and we've all been there. And I think that's a real art, isn't it? When you're doing your
Oh,
education, to talk about your own brain before you talk about a child's brain, because if you're not fine, then it's really hard to advocate
it's impossible. Let's
because
call it. It's impossible.
it just is not. It's just, and everybody will then just automatically think you are mad, and
Yep.
there's no sort of coming back from that. So I'm going to go through some of the questions that we've had. Um, one of the first ones, which I think is quite a broad question, but probably quite good, is how do you become involved in advocating for people with FASD?
Well, it's interesting. I get asked that question a lot. And in fact, I have an appointment with a caregiver that I met at an event just a few nights ago that reached out to me the next day and said, "Can I pick your brains? Because my work doesn't really understand. And I think I want to become an advocate." And I said, "The first step you've already done. You've called me, you've reached out." And I think that's what caregivers have to have the courage to do, is take that first step and ask somebody, how did you get started? How did I get started? I volunteered. I said, "Hey, I know a little bit about this. Can I help talk at the library session for Meet the Parents Day?" And I joined as many caregiver groups as I could in my broader community that was drivable, and offered. I said, "If you want someone to stand up and talk about lived experience, I have it. I have 15 years of it." And what I found out was, if I offered that enough times, people suddenly started taking me up on it. And being out in the public and talking about it is what ignited that passion to say, I'm not just doing a caregiver support group. I am doing womb to tomb support services, and we're calling it Harrison's Hope. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. Do you need to go to one extreme or the other? No, but take that first step and talk about it with family and friends and anybody that'll listen. And I
It's like
think you'll
some
find.
sorry to interrupt. It's like somebody's just written in the chat that she's so motivated to do more and get
Mhm.
involved in education and advocacy, but people just don't
Mhm.
engage with this topic, and it's as if
No.
the disability doesn't exist if you ignore it. And I think that's a true picture of the UK, because
Yes.
particularly in England, and Scotland is slightly different because the Scottish government do fund the hub. So in Scotland,
Yes.
we can offer one-to-one support for families and help them on the steps of their journey. In England, unfortunately, we can't. But as I'm England based but work for Scotland, I know the England side as well. And I know full well that in sort of specialist education provisions, where you've fought already for 2 years to get your child into the right school placement, once you get there, the real issue is that the professionals who are supposed to be there to help really only know about ADHD and ASD. And FASD, they just sort of put into this melting pot. And it is very much like Jackie is saying, it's like it doesn't exist. And it's sort of like if we ignore it, the parents will
It'll
go
go away.
away and you
Yep.
become the problem. So, what
Yes.
would your advice be to caregivers and parents who are in a situation where they have already fought a lot to get
Yep.
to where they're at, but then they're suddenly in this provision where still nobody's listening?
They're stymied.
Yeah.
So the approach that we recommend at Harrison's Hope, and again, this comes from a clinician who is FASD informed, and from the caregiver who calls baloney and malarkey when needed to. We found that anytime I have to battle for another support or any new system team player, um, it is a constant uphill battle, but it's all in your approach. So my first few advocacies for my son, I came out with a fire hose of facts and information on FASD, and the teacher shut me down and refused to listen to another minute of me. And it ruined my son's school year. It made it heck on earth for him. So I learned. I had another professional on the team that said, Mary, you need to know when to push the gas pedal and when to pump the brakes when you're educating practitioners who know nothing about FASD. Collaborate, partner, partner, partner. Hey, school, we've found that if our son gets a good night's sleep, his brain does great in the morning. And if someone encourages them to take his snacks at recess and have lunch and encourage him to eat that lunch, that his afternoon might be a little bit better, but afternoons are tough. So can we do a half day? And by offering to collaborate and share what works at home to make the days better for who your loved one is spending time with is the game changer. Don't go in there as you must do this, this, and this. It's how can I make school better? How can I make soccer team practices better? It's collaboration.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, like we support lots of families from the hub, and sometimes, they call up and they are angry and they are in crisis and they
Yep.
do feel like things are not going well, and I mean, from my experience, I can like write an email and be
Oh,
absolutely furious and then
yep.
reword it in AI to get my same point
Yes,
across. But I say, rewrite my email to the teacher with a nice tone.
exactly.
Because like you, I've learned that professionals really don't want parents coming in laying down the
Guns
law
ablazing.
and
No.
sort of undermining what they've learned for a long time. And it's really not their fault that their
Nope.
qualifications did not include education on FASD, 10 years ago. And so they're
Exactly.
going to be playing catch up. And if you want to be able to work with them, I totally agree. Anger and frustration needs to be parked when you're working with professionals, and you need to have your sort of different head on to
Yep.
be able to manage that really, because otherwise actually what you get is parent burnout, don't you? You just
Oh, big time.
become exhausted. You can't do it anymore. Every day is hard work. And it's like little short steps, little short targets, work a bit at a time. And I always finish my emails to my daughter's school with I fully appreciate what a supportive community you are, and I understand that
Yep.
there's a huge amount of neurodiverse children, and my child cannot be the center. And I always finish with that
Yep.
big paragraph about how amazing they are, despite the issue that I have at the time.
I can
So
also
I've
share a little nugget there that may also help, whether it's an email or a face-to-face. Storytelling with a compelling story of an experience, plus the facts and data that research shows us is also a great way to compel a professional in any field to help you.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
I think there's never anything truer than sort of facts tell the story, but stories sell.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
if you give them the facts, if you sit in a meeting and say, research tells us that 75% of children put forward for an adoption medical have prenatal alcohol exposure noted on their medicals. So that's the fact. And then you say, so therefore my child who has a diagnosis, and this is the problem with what happened in school today.
Exactly.
It just becomes more compelling, I think, if it's evidence backed, and they can't so easily dismiss. They
Exactly.
might be silent and they might not like you, but the reality is that they are facts, and facts back up any story. I mean, I think heartrending stories always get people to listen, but when you're talking about your own child, if you just tell the story of your home life, they just think you're a neurotic person
Yep.
or a neurotic parent. So you need to preface that
Absolutely.
with the sort of research evidence stats, really, and just sort of say, well,
Definitely.
fundamentally this is the case and this is my
Mm,
daughter and this is the outcome and this is the diagnosis, so therefore this. And you do feel a
exactly.
little bit like trying to be a teacher and feeling like it's
Yes.
hard work all the time, but there's a fine balance, isn't there, as to
Yeah.
how you do this. So a couple more questions then, Mary.
Yes.
So somebody sent early signs of diagnosis. My
Mm.
child has FASD and is incredibly rude and nasty to my partner, who
Mhm.
I've been with for 5 years. So I'm assuming from that question that the father is not the birth father.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, Strategies, reasonable adjustments.
Yeah.
What could she do?
So bottom line is, as caregivers, we do know our kiddos best, but sometimes we've got to get that detective hat on and take a step back and look at, my child gets dysregulated and snarky when he's spoken to too quickly. He's not given 2 to 3 minutes to process that he's been called to come for dinner. If you give him too many statements, all jumbled together, he'll lose it. And it may not be at the person who actually said too many statements. It may be at the person who's closest in earshot. So be the detective and start looking for patterns. Is it something that you're saying that your partner is taking a hit for, and it's you that needs to change your behavior to reduce those outbursts? Or is your partner setting forward requests, demands, and expectations that are above what your kiddo is capable of managing that day and that hour in that minute? And if that's the case, then your partner needs to change their expectations. And that's where the detective cap comes in, right? It's being able to step back in those moments and look to see what's causing it. Is it the environment, the people, or the child? Are they hangry? Are they hungry? Are they tired? Right? All of those things play in to how our kids communicate how they're feeling. And that's what they're doing when they're snarky. They're telling you something. It's just whether you're catching the message.
Yeah, it's like we always say, we talk about our children and young people's brains and go, are their brains tired? Are their brains hungry? Are
Yeah.
their brains this? But then it's like, but also check in with yourself, because if your brain's tired or your brain's hungry or your
Yep.
brain needs a rest, then obviously you're not functioning on all cylinders. Okay, so somebody else has asked, what are reasonable just adjustments for a
Mhm.
young person with FASD in education, which I guess is quite a broad
Yep. No.
question.
So again, this is one that I often get asked when I do speaking engagements. And while it's very child specific, most of our kiddos are that 60-second child to process in a 1-second world. So we want their education accommodations to include things like slow down when you're speaking, make short, sweet, simple toned suggestions and comments. Tone is critical with our guys. If there's a whiff of negativity, they escalate.
Yeah.
It's really important to stick to schedules, routine. So the supply teacher that comes in must know that my child has to sit at the front row of the desk on the far left, furthest away from the noisy lights. Okay, those are critical pieces to success. The same thing, does your child need more time to complete a work assignment at home or at school? Maybe it's a no homework rule, because I know my kiddo just loses it after school. So we don't do homework at home. He does it during his lunch break at school. It's understanding what are my kids' needs at each time of the day and how can the school adjust to meet his or her needs. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't do homework. We haven't done
Nope,
homework at
nope.
all because her brain is so done by the end of the school day that it just needs a break. Okay, so another one. Talking to employers about FASD and finding supportive employers. And I know you and I have listened and talked to many people who've got young people who are going into work, and probably both of us have some great stories. I have some really funny stories about that. But any advice you've got about
Yes.
talking to employers?
So there's two things that I always encourage caregivers to make sure they've done first before you even embark on this little adventure. Number one, have permission from your loved one to talk to anyone who is going to have your loved one report to them. So get permission. So my son started volunteering this summer. That's the lead up to employment. Volunteer experience helps teach our kiddos what the expectations are in a given working situation with a manager who has been informed in advance that my guy needs 2, 3 instructions max at a time. My guy needs a few minutes to process what you said before he'll go, oh, got it. And if there's concerns, let us know as his caregivers the day of the incident. You know, I know my son's going to come home and tell me what happened when he volunteered or worked, but you need to have an open, honest line of communication with whomever your child is reporting to and working with. My son's work team this summer didn't know that he had FASD, but they did know that he appreciated when people slowed down to talk to him. That's all you have to do. You don't
Did
have
you
to give the diagnosis.
did you make the decision to not tell them that he had the diagnosis?
My son right now is 14 and almost 15, and he wants to be normal. So
Yeah, like my daughter, she's 14.
he doesn't want everyone to know. He wants the freedom of choice to tell who he's going to tell. And I respect that, as everyone should respect. But you need to set them up for success as well. So I spoke to my son and said, here's some things that work at school. How do we let people at work know that? And he said, well, can't you just tell them that I work really good in the morning, but afternoons are kind of harder? So if I could work just the morning, that'd be great. I said, sure, we can. And that's what we did. We took his school accommodations and made them into a list of recommendations for work. And we support families through supported housing and supported employment. And that's exactly the path we take. We help them write their resumes. We help them prep for interviews. And we help them advocate for themselves to say, yeah, you know what? I sometimes need just a 10-minute break to get up and walk around the room just to move my body. And then I can settle back in and do whatever it is you're asking me to. And most employers and the employees, if they're told ahead of time, they don't question it. They just go, oh, okay, right? Hey,
It,
I have to wear these when I present because I can't see anything. It's no different, but it's how
it's
you present it, right?
Yeah, and I think it's quite funny though how you know what we perceive our children need in school, and then we move them into a work environment. So my daughter is only 14, so she's not in a work environment, but my friend, her child has been working, and he was working in just a retail outlet,
Yes.
and but it was in a shopping mall, so it
Hmm.
wasn't on a street. So he was going to come out of the shop. So of course, this shop had a back entrance where he had to leave for lunch, and it was a high class shop. So it had a security guard at the front of the shop. But across from the front of the shop was what we call it's like a WH Smith's. So
Yep.
it's a place where you could just go and get water and drinks and snacks and stuff.
Yes.
So he had to leave this shop via the back of the shop to go to this store that was literally through the door that he could see. And there were huge problems because the security guard has a brake.
Yep.
So his brain, bizarrely, would only not go out of the front of the shop when the security guard was there.
Yep.
So if the security guard wasn't there, he forgot he had to go through the back and just walked out the front. And this became like a point of real conflict for him
Yep.
actually keeping his job,
Yep.
and like real negotiation about
There
making
you go.
employers totally understand that impulse control and um,
Memory.
concrete
Yep.
visual. I can't go because the person is there with the security jacket on
Mhm.
means I know I've got to go that way, because as soon as I walk, I'm going to go, oh no, got to go the other
Yep.
way. And it
Bingo.
was it was so amazing to me to actually, because I'm a few years behind getting to that stage, but
Yep.
just thinking about how no matter how much our children progress, we still have to really scaffold that transition
Absolutely.
to work,
Yep.
and understand that, they do have short-term memory, and what you
Yep.
tell them at 9 o'clock will have gone at 4. And when
Or
they're
sooner.
tired and they've been working all day and they want a drink, they're just going to go out of the door. And I just, it's quite a funny story, really, but it is the reality, I guess, of what a lot of
Every
parents
day.
and caregivers live with every single
Every
day.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Joanne, perfect example. I'm volunteering this summer at a water ski school. My son taught kids how to water ski. But I did tell the owner ahead of time, do not let him manage the cash transactions. Do not let him manage the bookings. Have him pick up the life jackets, help kids put life jackets on, hang them up, get them in and out of the boat. I was very specific of here's his skill set. He's amazing teaching. Don't ask him to do the customer service stuff. And it's scaffolding to set them up for success. And
Yeah.
that's across the board, school, living, wherever they're living, housing, out in the community, work, all of it. That's what we do as caregivers,
Mm.
hopefully with a team to help you.
Yeah. Um, Somebody's just asked, let me just read, sorry, it's a very long post. It's 3, what's behaviors, spotlight, pressing over. Yeah. So we have a mum who's got 3 adults. One has ASD, one has ADHD, lots of the same behaviors.
Yes.
Um, However, also a support for learning teacher, and wondered how best to support engagement, focus, and
Mm,
concentration. she said she's tried every trick in the book. Wonder if there's any idea from anyone on what
Yep.
would be supportive for teens with FASD in the classroom, small number of pupils in the class.
So again, this is where we need to kind of step back and put that detective hat on. And what is it that the individual hyper focuses on?
Yeah.
So I know my kiddo, and I'm going to use him as the example. He needs to have a band around the two front legs of his chair so that his feet can pump like they're pumping the brakes. And then he can focus on what's being taught and still not be rocking like he's taken off on a rocket ship in his chair.
Mm.
So, what is it that your loved one needs to be able to focus? Is it movement? Is it getting up and leaving the chair? What is it? And then provide it. So, while it sounds like I'm not giving an answer, I actually am if you can play the detective and determine what is it that they need. Is it water at the table all the time? Sometimes it is. Is it chewing gum? What is it that they need to help them focus? Make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's really true. I see that daily with my own child. So we have somebody here this evening who's been a long time supporter of the hub, and he's asked he's trying to advocate for his adopted son, who's now in the criminal justice system. But
Mm.
he just asks this one very profound question, but
Mhm.
I think it's very important. Do you have any tips to get past the deafening silence
Mhm.
that characterizes the responses he gets when he talks about FASD?
Yes. Yeah. So anytime I experience a silence, regardless of whom I'm in front of, and I have been in front of judges as an advocate, um, and I can tell you that silence is an opportunity. When we call out the discomfort that people feel because they're quiet, I use that opportunity to say, this is a difficult topic. There's a lot of stigma attached to this disorder. It's the only disorder that's actually naming what caused it. You know, Alzheimer's doesn't really explain what the disorder is. And I take that as a teaching opportunity and let whatever I say sink in. And what I find is, again, a fact and a small piece of humor can break that silence and allow people to go, yeah, I am uncomfortable with this. Acknowledge the discomfort and then talk about it. That's what breaks the barriers.
Yeah, I think it really does. It's like having that courage, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard for people, isn't it, to
Oh,
step forward and be vulnerable and
yeah,
not want to be dismissed, I
absolutely.
guess.
And
Um,
dismissals will happen. It's part of the journey,
and
right?
you
We got
just
to be
have
the
to,
ducks. We got to
yeah,
let the
you
water roll.
just gotta go, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, somebody's just asked, my son is 11 and he won't leave the house. Any suggestions?
Again, this is a hard one, especially if their social circle is online video games. That again, a lot of our families are dealing with this, and I'm going to make two suggestions. One is not popular with many parents. If your kiddo is an indoor kiddo, provide them opportunities for indoor activities. And that does not mean shoving a tablet or a screen in front of them. It means one-on-one connection time. Do you know how many games of Marathon, Monopoly, and Uno I have played? More than 5 lifetimes worth. But guess what? It strengthens the relationships with our loved ones. It builds trust. so that when we do finally work up the courage to say, hey, come walk the dog with me. I didn't give it as a choice. I did it as an encouragement. Then, with a stronger relationship, they will come out and walk the dog. Set your expectations where your loved one is at, strengthen your relationship, and do activities with them to build that connection. And then move it out of the home. It will work. It takes effort and time and patience.
Okay, I think our last question for this evening,
Yes.
because we are coming towards the end now, is we have a family who've sent us quite a lot of information about what's going on in their situation, but there's quite a lot of questions within their information, but one of them I think is really important. So they sort of say, how will we cope and how will we manage this? But they've said they've read a number of books and been on a number of training courses. So now they feel like professionals expect them to have the answers because they've attended courses and read books, but they don't have the answers for a school environment.
No.
So is this, they say, something unique to coping and managing a child who has an FASD diagnosis? And do they just shoot in the dark and hope for the best? Big
So
question, I guess.
it is a big question. And I always like to caveat a response to this scale and scope of a question with, you have to put your oxygen mask on first before you can support your child and getting their oxygen mask on first. So my number one recommendation to all caregivers is take care of your own health first, calm yourself first, educate yourself, then take that trepid step into advocating and sharing information. And I always caveat any conversation for the first time with someone, hey, I hear you're having a hard time with. I found at home this works. How can we make it work at school? And it's that collaborating, right? It's connecting, collaborating, and making it happen.
Yeah, and I definitely think you have education and then you start to know your child best. And I think it's
Yep.
when you have a community, you build your
Yep.
confidence, don't you? You get
Absolutely.
community. When you've got friends and you've got community, you can run that by people. And
Absolutely.
generally, I think 90% of the time, once you've got your education, actually your gut feeling is right. You know your child best. You know what's going on.
Yep.
It's just, I think, the fear of going in and confronting professionals who have qualifications that you probably as a parent maybe don't have the same ones or different
Yep.
qualifications. So it's about building your own confidence in yourself to advocate and really know that in your head you know your child best and nobody's going to tell you any different, because
Absolutely.
once you have a diagnosis, once you've done your education, it doesn't matter who you connect with across the world. It's a global community, and FASD is FASD, whether you're in America, Australia, South Africa, England, Scotland, it's the same. Our systems may be different in terms of education and healthcare, but ultimately we're all battling the same problems
Absolutely.
in our own education and healthcare systems.
Absolutely.
Worldwide. It's not, it's not just an English thing or an American thing or an Australian thing. It's a global thing. So
Absolutely.
I think that's really true. So we are now at the end of this evening's webinar. I would like to say a massive thank you to Mary for joining us this evening. I hope that you found it really beneficial and that we've answered as many questions as we could. Our next webinar is on the 13th of November with Dr. Jackie Pye. Please come. You will really enjoy it. Mary and I have been there and done some training with her. Feel free to join our Facebook group, Find Your Tribe, as we've talked about this evening. That is so important for every parent and caregiver to have community. Please leave your feedback. I think Barbara has posted the forms in our chat. Have a lovely rest of the evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got some lovely comments coming in, Mary. Thank you so much to you. It's been lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. And good night, everybody.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
Much
you.
joy.